Let me go to Judah, to the city where my ancestors rest, so that I may rebuild it. Let me go to Judah, to the city where my ancestors rest, so that I may rebuild it. Now, some of you know this, but I'm not a big fan of winter. Particularly the part we are in right now. The holidays are way over, and even though the sun arrives a little bit earlier every day, the weather is somehow even colder than before, and everyone I know, including most of you, is a little bit sick. So I am surviving this winter by making plans and lists. Plans for big trips over the spring and the summer. Some to cities with hotels, and some are trips to places with little or no infrastructure. There are work trips and retreats and hopefully music festivals and even some more ambitious vacation plans. And all of these trips require lists. They require planning, just like the temple. And I do this. I make these lists in the cold and dark of January and February because sometimes, it turns out, sometimes planning toward a goal and marshaling my resources helps me to imagine that I am somewhere else. Namely, in a future where I have done those things, where I have overcome the obstacles in my path and am enjoying the fruits of my labor. There I can see myself setting up that tent, a short walk from the main stage in July, or stepping off the boat at Star Island and celebrating the fact that I am there and I am ready to make the most of the time I have been given. What fuels my lists and my plans are goals and visions. Sometimes, thanks to my job, these goals and visions are, in fact, explicitly religious. But the process is the same, regardless. And in general, the goal is the same. We plan, all of us plan, in order to get the most out of the experience, so as to get the most out of life. We plan so we can get the most out of our experiences, so that we can get the most out of life. Our reading from Nehemiah today is about planning. It's when he starts the plans. And that book of Nehemiah, as I said, is full of lists. Lists of materials and of people, of locations, of gates and walls, of letters of free passage. And, as I said earlier, there are parts of it that sound a lot like our own annual report. But our reading from Nehemiah today illustrates his own deep commitment. His own deep commitment. And that shows us that dry reports and lists are often written and backed up with the passion and energy and excitement of the writers and the readers and the subjects. The residents of Jerusalem were living in the ruins of a large city. They numbered themselves somewhere between the low 3 digits and the high 3 digits and the low 4. We're not talking about a lot of people. And the second temple was being completed. But it was surrounded by fallen buildings. There was no place to live. His community, his congregation was at risk. So Nehemiah began to plan and to take the lead in the raising of the walls. Now, the scholars tell us that it probably took about 2 centuries to really get things back to normal. So neither Nehemiah nor Ezra ever saw the end of their vision. But sometimes plans are like that. like the great cathedrals in Europe. Certain visions require, for us to have them, they require the bending of time, anticipating a future that we can plan for but cannot visit. Some visions, some goals require faith, and they require hope, and they require trust. So maybe it's obvious, but it still bears repeating, that our task today requires that sort of vision. And it requires the sort of attention and patience that they displayed as well. Annual meeting is about lists. It's about planning. It is about finding ways to get the most out of the experience of the Eliot Church so we may get the most out of life. And as dry as it may seem at times, there is life and divinity in this ritual of annual meeting. Now, our setting is different from that of the Second Temple period, obviously. We have challenges, of course, but they are different ones. Part of the process of this Sunday is to think a little bit about those challenges. And some of them we already know. In the past few years, we've talked a lot about the decline in numbers of youth, for example, and examined the reasons for that, many of which are beyond our control. And we have also discussed the problems of numeric growth in general, in a society that no longer sees houses of worship as a necessity, and in a consumer culture that more easily supports a fee-for-service model for the spiritual life than the in-depth and infinitely more rewarding experience of participating in and belonging to a religious community like ours. But part of this Sunday is also about celebrating. It's about celebrating all the great things that have happened this year. And so many great things have happened that I think we can look at past annual meeting sermons, both mine and Shane's depressing sermons, and past reports if we need the details. If we need details about the difficulties that we have addressed in the past and still address today. Over the past few years, after all, we have actually learned a lot. And this year, many people have stepped up to move us in new and interesting directions. We have reached out in new ways of service to our community, continuing with our old ties and relationships with groups like the Service Council, who sponsors the Open Door Community Meal, and Family Promise, our local interfaith initiative addressing homelessness and housing. And we have deepened our relationship with the still relatively new Natick is United, which promotes challenging conversations around issues of race and diversity. We've also reached out in different ways, in other ways, seeking to invite more people to share in our church life. A friend of mine who is an Episcopal priest told me yesterday, completely unprompted I might add, that she has learned that things like a viable and active internet and social media presence, a plan for online advertising, combined with old school concepts like variable signage and real-world social gatherings, are on the rise as reasons people visit and join congregations. This is good news, because we have all those things. And she also said that perhaps they are even closing in on the tried and true method of inviting your friends. So does this mean we're off the hook for inviting friends? No. No, we are not. But it does mean that this year's initiatives, like the banner along the side of the church, or our video introductions for Sunday services, our Facebook and YouTube presences, our newsletters and web page, along with those personal moments at pub theology and lookout hangouts and frankly coffee hour, are creating an environment that is open and welcoming to visitors and members alike. There is a new energy at church this fall. Thanks to our attendance drive and the commitment of people to make that happen, our attendance is up. And people of all ages are seeking out ways to be active in church. And this is a good sign and a great asset. Now, Waldemar Argyle, an actual past minister of this church, has some pretty rough things to say in our reading today about the people who sometimes make up congregations like ours. He said that too often we, are people for whom every day is Independence Day. And that we talk a great game, but do not always play it. The energy we have at Eliot Church runs counter to this tendency. We understand that those lists of people in Nehemiah are more than an abstraction, but living, breathing, dedicated human beings. Individuals, yes, but ones sharing their great journey with each other. The Eliot Church is, in Argyle's words, showing the world that liberal religion has the power to move people. From the comfortable Davenport and the Sunday paper to the hard pew and the rigorous moral and intellectual demands of the liberal service. So in a few moments, we will settle in to our lists and plans that will help us to continue to move people and to steer this congregation into the next year and the next generation. So let us bring our best selves to the task, our energy, our intention, and our love for each other and for this Eliot Church.